Welcome to the long-term owner's review of the 2024 Citizen Tsuyosa Spectrum. So we're going to start with a longer TLDR today, then look at some key details of the watch, discuss my big upgrade to it, and finally drop into a discussion about the industry. Skip ahead to the clasp section for a quick and cheap way to really improve your wearing experience. TLDR, it's fun, wears quite well, and looks way nicer than its price point, but I'd only buy it on sale. A little bit more. The Citizen Tsuyosa Spectrum Blade Rainbow, whatever you want to call it, takes a page from homage brands by doing the aesthetics of the watch quite well, such as the dial, bracelet, and the case, and then cutting costs on the functional aspects such as the movement, clasp, and a lack of a quick change comfort features. So again, skip ahead to the clasp section specifically for a quick and cheap way to really improve your functional wrist experience. Otherwise, it has a solid wrist presence, comfortable bracelet. The OEM clasp is very rattly. It has a very cool dial, ho-hum cop-out automatic Miyota caliber, and why there's no quick release bracelet or clasp? Well, to conclude, Citizen cuts all the corners when it comes to functionality and focuses on what sells, aesthetics. So is it really worth $350 US? Let's discuss and decide. Since its release 7 months ago, there has been a one soft review and an unboxing on YouTube, and that's pretty much all you can find. It remains limited to select regions and otherwise remains obscure AF. Retail is US $450 and sale price is typically around $350 USD. This exclusive can be found many places, but not where I am, so I had to import this from a Hong Kong dealer off Chrono24. Great experience, and my price shipped after duties was $340 US. Why did I get it? Well, I have been keeping my eye out for a multicolor dialed watch, but everything I found just didn't do it for me, like paint splatter dials or adventurine or novelty dials like the Mido TV, or the rest of the watch just didn't do it for me, or the ask was too much for something that is just meant to be a handsome, fun novelty, until I found this. So let's start at the reason to get it, aka the dial. It's easy to read. The outer minute track is in different colors, but has been subtly applied, while the massive lume plots are filled with the most basic of lume, but in the light, they look great. They're very white. Easy to read with the giant stick hands as well, and the dial is almost sunburst, like it should be a subtle sunburst, it's been single coated, but it's just not. It's firmly a metallic grained brushed finish. At a glance though, most are likely just going to think it's a sharp looking blue dial. Regardless of what you think, when you're wearing it and you look at it, if you appreciate it, you'll notice different details at different times, and the more you wear it, the more you'll appreciate it. So, speaking of cheaping out, and kind of a common theme for the functionality of this watch, let's start with the lume. If you want a ton of the cheapest C1 Super Luminova and not a proprietary in-house lume material like, say, Seiko, then Citizen has cut the costs for you. This stuff lasts all of about 10 minutes, and when you put it under ultraviolet light, you can see where it's just breaking and hasn't actually been applied well. However they did it, it looked great in the daytime, not great at night, and you won't see it for very long at night at all. Surprisingly, the Spectrum has a lot of wrist presence, and this is coming from a guy who wears an LUC Pro 1 Behemoth. Really, it's a perfect weight balance on my wrist, comfortable all day, but still has some heft to it. While the watch falls into an average height category, I kind of find it a pretty thick execution when compared to some of the competition, and the case size could have been pared down further with the use of a Miyota 9 series movement that we're finding in much of the micro brand industry today. Brushed top, polished flanks, and a polished bevel along the sides all look good, and the high polish center links really work here versus, say, the PRX, which is just all brushed, or the titanium versions, which copy the PRX bracelet. Otherwise, the case flank, doesn't it look like a Timex Q or PRX? I'm going to pop it up in a bit image here. The bracelet certainly is familiar. Take a look at this, and the crown, doesn't that look an awful lot like this? So, speaking of the crown, trying to hide it is just silly. Either hide it completely or don't. Half measures just mean that it's an absolute pain to charge if it's dead and to set. Conversely, mind you, your general audience doesn't have a stable of watches, so for the majority, or many at least, they're not going to have to worry about the pain of resetting it all the time. It's either going to be on their wrist or it's going to be in a drawer, not worn. The new small seconds iterations have a larger crown, go figure, and we'll be speaking more about the small seconds version because it is has many iterative improvements that have been applied to it, so go figure, this was one of them. Personally, I keep my Tsuyosa on a watch winder just so that I don't have to deal with the crown. So in the same area we have the crystal. With overhead lighting, especially indoors, the Cyclops casts a shadow over the date quite often, obscuring your vision of the date, the thing that it's trying to make easier to see. Outside in natural light tends not to be an issue, and I generally kind of like a Cyclops. My, speaking of LUC GMT Pro, has a reverse Cyclops on the inside of the crystal, and I think works quite well with it. But because this one also has a little bit of a base, it also picks up grime and dirt. It's very interesting, having had quite a number of date justs and other Cyclopses. This is a strange execution, and yeah, not the best here for function. So, flipping the watch over, the case back. So the reason this has an exhibition case back, and also the reason I'm even mentioning the case back, is because it's been added as a sales point for lay mall shoppers deciding between a quartz or mechanical watch from their local jewelry store. Barring putting in a competitive movement like the Miyota 9 series that we're seeing pop up across the micro industry today, this should have been a solid case back to bring the watch, thickness-wise, in as slim as possible for comfort on the daily wear. Not that it's not a fine enough size, it's just that given that there's really nothing to see back here, it would have been preferred to give that extra millimeter or two into comfort and wearability. So, to the movement. The 8210 movement here is the, I want to call it the gilt version, but it's not gilt, right? But it's been given a finish to hide the manufacturing imperfections and not actually have to really apply any sort of quote finishing. It does have, the way it's been applied, not Geneva striping. So why not go one step further and just maybe polish it all up, or if you're going with a manufacturing finish, give it a frosted finish or a blackened finish rather than this. This seems to be the least expensive way they could have done it, and almost comes off as like a cheap alloy in person. I feel like a more modern Miyota 9 series caliber would have enabled the Tsuyosa to be even thinner, as I've already mentioned, and their Citizen's insistence on using the 8 series in its lineups without even improving the power reserve is really quite telling about how Citizen views the movement within its products. Seriously, the 8210 isn't even nearly the most recent version of the 8 series, so it's just that Citizen is going maybe through their old stock inventory within their warehouses, or it's just slightly more expensive since it's not a priority for the customer that they're targeting for this product. Right? A Saint Martin has a more recent movement with an external customers, say like Woolbrook, who use improved 8215s, have a longer power reserve. It's a low blow to the average customer who, of course, won't notice, appreciate, or care about it, I would argue. But for those of us who do, or anyone who looks up, is going to question it. Interestingly, on the new small seconds iteration that we mentioned previously, it also has a new 83 series movement, the 8322. So let's flip this on its side and take a look at the bracelet. The case and the bracelet finishing tones actually match. Pretty shocking for me for a watch in this price point, and given that most luxury brands can't even do this, though how many of them are vertically integrated, I'll leave up to you. The bracelet is a 22 mil tapered down to a 20 mil. It's comfortable, works, I think it looks good, and reasonably solid for the price, but the clasp is super rattly. Overall, package is still better in my opinion than, say, the Seiko Presage. Personally, I prefer it over the PRX, which has the butterfly clasp. It hides the clasp to make it more elegant, but I like this one because if given the choice, you still do have 3 very micro manual adjust positions, which at least gives you something. However, I wanted to improve upon this, and so I went on and found an eBay special that fits perfectly in place of this stock clasp and only requires 2 additional links to be removed. So it doesn't take up a ton of room. It's still sizable, like look at the size difference of these things, but really, for the functionality that you get from this is fantastic. When it's warm out and I have it, it's a cold morning, warm afternoon, I just press the button, boop, there you go. It's adjusted. So this is a really great system. This clasp here, I mean, this is just a milled eBay special, and when you open it up, you can see how it ratchets and then holds in place, and then press the button and it releases. Makes it easy getting on, easy getting off, kind of like divers of yesteryear that have that dive extension that's really just to make it a little bit easier for grandpa to get the watch on and off. This is heavy duty, it doesn't rattle, and really works well. The only thing I've noticed is that if I push it, it's tough to just push shut, so I have to press the button, the actuators, to shut it. Otherwise, I've had a really great time with this aftermarket clasp and highly recommend it if you have a bracelet that you like but you don't like the clasp of. I am briefly going to mention the box set, of which I don't even know where mine is, somewhere in storage. As a mass market mall product, most Citizens come with a minimum of box set and accessories, right down to the paper booklet warranty. And I just mentioned this because when you compare this to what you get from the experience with many micro brands, it's an absolute joke. So, comparison. Let's start with the Timex Q reissue. While it's overall a cheaper but also less expensive quartz alternative that has its own charm and following, it is in the same realm as this, although again, the price point's not the same. I've consistently seen these on the Canadian used market for as low as $60 US plus shipping, and even then they just tend to sit. But that's because they're at a price point where people just buy them new from Timex. But if you like this style and you don't want to pay or want the automatic movement here, and yeah, have a Q. I think they're great. That said, the Timex M79, which is the automatic version, I would not recommend. They're just as cheaply put together as the reissue, but they have a big ask for what they are, and all you're getting different is the different colorway and the absolute cheapest 82 series Miyota. So I don't suggest going that route. Go Timex, go quartz. So let's talk Tissot PRX Swiss Excellence. This price-wise competes with the quartz version, however, is positioned as a value proposition against the automatic version. You can see similar styling, different take on it, of course, but where the price difference is in execution, the movement, comparing the Powermatic 80 against this base Miyota. And then, of course, marketing-wise, the Tissot is just positioned higher because it's, again, Swiss excellence. So, when you go to the mall, that's where you're going to find the person who's looking at these going back and forth. Now, let's jump into the discussion about this. So, this released without any marketing, online direct order exclusive alongside a white dial version, and of course that online order is region locked. I don't know, read the website and you get $400 worth of watch marketing effort and a earth inspired dial, along with inconsistent messaging across their AD network, as you'll see, Radiant, Gradient, Spectrum, a bunch of different names. All the links to some of the different examples I have are in the description. And speaking of marketing, has anyone been the target of any marketing for this model? I haven't seen a review or anything on it. So let me know in the comments where, if anywhere, Citizen has marketed this gem as maybe it's viral on TikTok, Bookgram, that I'm just not a part of. On this note, I don't know what to refer to it as yet, and I think I've settled on the Spectrum, but maybe the Tsuyosa or the Rainbow, I don't know. Message in the comments what you think sounds best. Now, let's go back to the PRX. This model, specifically for me, has more charm than the PRX line. And I've tried, I think, most of the Quartz models, and they just felt kind of soulless, maybe too utilitarian. With all this said, the color pathways of your regular Tsuyosa offerings are as plain as the common PRX is, so it's kind of which one do you find less boring, again, if you're in the market for this style of watch. An interesting change ushered in by the new small seconds iteration, though, is that the 9mm lugs have been widened to 13 mils, the latter being the unspoken integrated lug size for brands like Tissot and Oris, and now have the same quick change pin system. It seems to work still well visually here, though it gives more of a Breitling bullet look in my opinion, but 9mm I suspect was selected originally because it struck the best aesthetic balance. So while the 13mm change ushers in strap changes and quick change capability, I would say that the 9mm visually looks more congruent, and there was a reason that they had chosen it originally. Overall, as Mike at This Watch, That Watch discusses in a video about homage brands, link in the description if I can find it, Citizen does the aesthetics, which I propose is what the customer is primarily interacting with, while cutting costs on more unseen functional aspects, passing along the increased cost of distribution, marketing, and name cachet into its retail pricing scheme. At least Citizen's distribution network is so large you can easily go to your nearest mall for servicing, And on this note, the warranty for some regions is 5 years, but on others it's just 1 plus an extended one upon registration, so buyer beware. I get it. The target audience is Aunt Ethel or your everyday mall walker. So while I chose this because of the dial and matching aesthetics, I do understand the wider audience for this target will never care about many of these functional details. And marketing wise, it's interesting again to assess it against the PRX. The Tsuyosa can be compared against the Powermatic 80 as being half the price and all the self-winding one can hope for, while being the same price as the battery dependent PRX Quartz. Now, this perspective can easily be reversed by a savvy mall salesperson upselling the PRX Quartz as being the same price for Swiss precision. or the Paramatic 80 as the upsell for being super Swiss with long weekend crushing power reserve and iPhone resistant properties. So, my final thought is for you, the enthusiast who not only knows the watch space, but is also interested enough to have watched this long-winded deep dive and make it this far. So my question, name brand or micro? You and I know better. And here is the dial, an integrated case style, compelling enough to sell it to you? Or are all the compromises, along with all the alternatives, a deal breaker? I'll tell you that if it were between these two in a vacuum, I wouldn't have to blink twice before choosing the Zelos. But that's just me. And based on my experience and knowledge and interest. And as this watch, that watch, Mike said recently, as a buyer, a retail buyer from 80s, his data says that the watches he wears the most are the ones he tries on first. I'm not that kind of buyer, but are you? So final thoughts. From a market perspective, mass market watches like these are not competitive when compared to the micro-brand competition. And in a way, you're buying the name and the convenience of a global sales and service network. And, personally, when I look at the slightly broader lineup, I'm compelled by the gray small seconds on a strap. It's around 325 US imported right now and looks really attractive with that pretend guilloche dial. And but for now, I'm going to wait. I don't need another 8200 series automatic in my collection right now, but I'll see. Maybe the market saturation will weigh down the price further, and I'll just have no choice but to add one. So to wrap things up, love the style. Case setup, it's great, and the look looks fantastic on the wrist. But there are some really cheap, intentional corners cut here, and but I'll say this: great job to Citizen on listening and making iterative improvement. So I hand it over to you. What do you think of the Citizen Tsuyosa line? Do you think Citizen's just too cheap to compete? Would you pick one up, or do you prefer the alternatives like the PRX? Let me know in the comments, and don't forget, like, subscribe, hit the bell for more reviews and discourse. Thanks for watching.